Anyway, following the U.S. exit from the Iran nuke deal and the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, Mideast tensions continue to escalate, but former Senator Joe Lieberman, standing behind the president's decision, is going to tell us why now. And we already had a little conversation, Senator, but you are the chairman of the United Against Nuclear Iran and an old friend of the show, old friend of mine, and I've always, I don't know, I remember when you became an independent that there were some reasons. I mean, have you moved right of there yet, or are you? Does independent do it for you right now, or yeah, I mean, what happened to the Democratic Party? Do you look around and say, "Where the hell am I? What planet is this?" I mean,
yeah. You know, I'm still registered as a Democrat.
I know you said that.
I really am an independent. I'm spending a lot of time on organizations like United Against Nuclear Iran and another one called No Labels, where we try to encourage members of both parties in Congress to finally get together and do something for their constituents in our country instead of
don't hold your breath though
battling. Well, we got a little progress.
But you must But you must be you're going to be under assault because you're totally behind the move of the embassy to Jerusalem, number one, and I think you're totally behind Trump pulling out of the Iran deal.
I am in both cases. Let me just make a larger point based on what you just said. Our politics have become what they weren't when I got involved, which is the parties used to bring together people with different opinions and help them work with people in the other party to actually get things done. Today, the parties are like warring tribes. And so if you're a member of one tribe and you dare to support something the leader of the other tribe does, oh, you're in trouble. Well, that's ridiculous. What if you happen to agree on that issue with what the leader of the other tribe did? And continuing with the tribal metaphor, I happen to agree with President Trump on these two decisions you cite, pulling out of the nuclear agreement with Iran and moving our embassy to Jerusalem and Israel.
And when you read the media coverage of it, what do you pull your hair out? What do you?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of the media coverage contributes to this tribal division in our country, and now it's beginning to seep down beneath the politicians. So you start to poll members of both parties, not the people in Congress, and they have such different points of view. And I think some of it, again, is if one party takes the lead on something, members of the other party feel they have to oppose it, and members of that party feel they have to support it, whether they really support it or not. And that's not, talk about truthfulness, that's not being true, honestly, to themselves. And we always believe that if you're straight with the public here, there are disagreements, but you work them out and you get something done. And that's how the country got to be as great as we are.
What do you think, Senator, the path forward is with Iran in terms of sanctions and how the president plans on this issue?
Well, I think so far President Trump and the administration has done well. I mean, the key point was, to me, briefly, this was always a bad deal. I worked a long time with a lot of other members of both parties in Congress to put those economic sanctions on Iran. They were intended to pressure Iran to give up its nuclear weapons program and to stop supporting terrorism and aggression in the Middle East. And we gave all that pressure on Iran for just pretty much a pause in their nuclear program and what turned out to be an acceleration in all their other behavior, bad behavior. So I think President Trump was right to pull out. And what we're seeing now is the strength of the American economy if the president chooses to build from that strength. Here's what I mean. This is not leading from behind. A lot of people said, oh, my God, the sky will fall if we pull out of the agreement. The Europeans will leave us. The reality is that we're still the strongest economy in the world. And whatever the political elites in Europe, for instance, are trying to do now to save the Iran nuclear deal, their businesses are speaking with their feet, with their wallets, whatever. In other words, in the last week or so, Total, Maersk, Siemens, Allianz have all said they're going to begin to pull out of Iran because basically if President Trump sticks to what he said, which I hope and pray he will, they got a simple choice to make. Do I do business in the $400-and-something billion GDP Iranian economy or the $19 or $20 trillion American economy and the American financial system. And the answer to that question for them is simple. They're going to pull out of Iran and do business with America.
How does that reality of the strength, the internal strength of the U.S. economy, relative to everywhere else in the world, bear on this posture of we need to get better trade deals because we've been victimized by the world economy?
Yeah. So I think that it's a really good point, because I think we're operating now from economic strength in America. So the president does have leverage in trying to renegotiate some of our trade agreements. But please don't let it go to a trade war, because that could really hurt our economy. It could hurt the global economy, could hurt trading partners like China. But we're all interdependent. We help each other grow. I mean, President Kennedy's old wonderful phrase, "a rising tide raises all boats," which was about the American economy, is today very much true about the global economy. So I guess what I'm saying is we got the strength economically in America to negotiate tough, but don't let it run away and create a trade war.
I mean, there's been fractured politics in the country before. I mean, we fought wars based on things, and I don't want to be naive that these times are unprecedented, but I don't remember social media, and I don't remember being able to be in an echo chamber of cable news where all I need to listen to are my own opinions.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, I hope it's not some national horrific tragedy that finally brings us back together as a country, but how does it finally resolve itself if it's I mean, the people that are in the resistance for Trump are not going to accept this guy as president even, and there's probably 45% of the country that there are 40% that are just hardcore in that group. I mean, if Mueller shuts down his investigation without anything, I don't know what they're going to have to move to Canada.
Well, that's true.
How does it finally resolve itself?
I mean, first I want to say that I really do believe, because I read history about this, we've had political division before. We had a civil war in the 19th century, but politically, in terms of our system, I think the division today is unprecedented. Really, we've never had it before.
Twitter doesn't help, Joe, and neither does social media, and neither does...
No, it doesn't, right? It actually fans the flames. I mean, there's a story to be told here. Part of it is the influence of special interest money in politics. Part of it is the parties pulling people apart because they're always thinking about, how do I win the next election? The old days, we used to figure, how am I going to go back to my constituents and tell them what I've actually done for them? That's the way to win an election. Today, it seems to be, I'm going to go back and tell my constituents, I try to do it for you, but it's those bums in the other party that prohibited me from doing so. It's amazing that the country, the economy particularly, is doing as well as it is. And honestly, it's a tribute to the private sector and the individual entrepreneurship, innovation, hard work by a lot of people.
You're still registered as a Democrat. You're saying these things, and it's just such a disconnect.
I must be, it's lifelong. I must be praying for a return to the good old days.
Private sector solutions, really?
Well, how do you explain it?
Don't let anyone tell you they create the jobs.
Well, the government is so dysfunctional. It'd be one thing if it was trying to do, really doing something, and you could say, oh, that might have contributed. But the economy's so good, growth up, unemployment down, kind of amazing. But there's a lot of big problems that are not being solved. And in a way, one that always worries me is the national debt, the accumulated debt, over $20 trillion.
And there are some bipartisan issues like education and like the skills gap, and and we want a safety net for people that really need a safety net.
Let's get together and make it work. And it's not a question of giving on your principles. Basically, the question is not to demand 100% of what you want on every issue. We're a big country, 330 million. They're represented by 535 members of Congress. Very different people. You're only going to get something done if you say, hey, if I get 50% of what I want out of this bill, and I give 50% to the other side, we're doing pretty well. And the country is doing well. That's the most important thing.
So at this point, you're going to focus on no labels, and I mean, I'm glad you're here today to talk about this.
United against nuclear Iran, because I continue to believe, with all the threats in the world, a nuclearized radical Iran is the greatest threat to us, to world stability. So they're having economic troubles now. They're in a dive, really.
And hope springs eternal of some type of Iran, like an Arab Spring happening in Iran.
Well, it does. There's a lot of opposition there. There are actually protests going on there against the government almost every day. Most of them are not big enough as they were just in December of last year to get the media attention. People were shouting something in the streets and had posters in Iran in December. Don't stop giving our money to Syria. Keep it here for us. We need it. I mean, they've got a generation of well-educated Iranians who can't find a job. And that's the raw material for a revolution. So we can hope and pray that this regime will end. I'd like to think they could change, but I don't see any sign of it.
So what do you think when McCain said he wished he asked you?
Well, I was touched by it. I mean, I knew I was actually vetted. In other words, he said to me in the spring of 2008, I want to vet you for vice president. I said, are you kidding me? No, he says, I'm not kidding you. I said, Johnny, I got elected as an independent a couple of years ago, but I'm still a registered Democrat. God bless him. He says, well, that's the point. He said, I'd like to make a statement that we really need a bipartisan government. But so
Then you picked Sarah Palin.
Yeah, I never thought it could happen. I think people in the party, as he says in the book, convinced them that it would divide the Republican Party. But he's a hero in so many ways, in war and in peace. And the very fact that he thought about something like this tells you a lot about who he is. Forget that it was me. I mean, we're just great friends, and we keep in touch still. And he's okay. God bless him. He's fighting something, but he's a great fighter, and I keep in touch with him.
Thanks for being here today, Senator.
Thank you.
Good
Great to be with you.
Okay.
Good discussion. Have a